And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances people died.
I'm going to have to respond to this just really quickly, but by Senator Clinton's own vetting standards, I don't think she would make it, since President Clinton pardoned or commuted the sentences of 2 members of the Weather Underground, which I think is a slightly more significant act than me serving on a board with somebody for actions that he did 40 years ago.
The FBI shot this hidden video of 2 Puerto Rican nationalists making bombs in a Chicago safe house 16 years ago. And now that grainy footage has become ammunition in a battle between the White House and Congress over the president's grant of clemency to these 2 and 9 other Puerto Rican nationalists.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances people died.
Nobody dreamt that this was a daytime bombing of a restaurant in New York City in the United States of America, because it simply was not the sort of thing that happened in America.
The senseless bombing had been perpetrated by what was arguably the most active terrorist organization in U.S. history, the FALN. But in 1975, the FALN was a newly formed, previously unheard of organization that through deadly violence advocated complete independence for Puerto Rico.
6 people were killed in the FALN bombings over a period of several years, and more than 70 were injured. But the White House says the people who got clemency don't have blood on their hands.
In this case, they were convicted of very serious crimes, not of maiming or killing, but of serious weapons offenses.
The 2 people in this video, Edwin Cortez and Alejandrina Torres, were convicted of conspiracy to make destructive devices and possession of explosives, among other things.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances people died.
But the president apparently believes that the people who made bombs are different from those who set them off.
Because I did not believe they should be held in incarceration, in effect, by guilt by association.
Critics in Congress from both parties don't buy it, but clemency is a presidential prerogative, and Congress may not be able to stop it.
Hillary's biggest problem running for the Senate was that she wasn't a New Yorker. And how is she going to appeal to the specific ethnic groups that make up the New York State electorate? So, in September 1999, right in the middle of her Senate campaign, she was approached by City Councilman Jose Rivera, who really is a spokesman for the Hispanic community in New York, who gave her a packet urging the pardoning of the FALN terrorists. And included in the packet was a letter to Hillary asking her to use her influence on her husband to get these pardons granted. And 2 days later, they were.
Freedom came today for most of the 14 Puerto Ricans who accepted President Clinton's controversial gift of clemency. 11 of them, who describe themselves as nationalists, some others describe them as terrorists, were released from federal prisons around the country.
It made no sense. Not one of the incarcerated FALN terrorists had requested clemency or had expressed any remorse. In fact, prior to that action, the Clinton administration had granted clemency in just 3 cases out of over 3,000 applications, according to the Office of the Pardon Attorney at the Justice Department.
It was putting a political agenda of the Clintons above my father's life.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances people died.
Sandy Berger appeared on television a day or 2 after the pardons were granted, or after the clemency was granted, and stated that these people were not personally involved in violence. That's simply not the fact. In this case, these people were convicted of planting 36 bombs in Chicago. If that's nonviolence, then Mr. Berger's dictionary is a little bit different than mine is. The Department of Justice received a memo from the FBI saying that under no circumstances should these people be released. The President of the United States, who had access to all this information, ignored the facts of the matter.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances people died.
You have to ask yourself, who benefited from this besides the terrorists themselves? It's my view that have concluded the only other person that could have benefited from this was Hillary Clinton.
The Senate, on a 95-2 vote, later denounced President Clinton's FALN clemency. Candidate Clinton claims she is the most experienced. Her husband claimed she was intimately involved in his administration, and yet Hillary said publicly she had, quote, no involvement in or prior knowledge of the decision.
Obviously she knew about it. Obviously she asked Bill to do the pardons, And obviously, when she says she knows nothing about it, she's not telling the truth.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances, people died.
I'm going to have to respond to this just really quickly, but by Senator Clinton's own vetting standards, I don't think she would make it, since President Clinton pardoned or commuted the sentences of 2 members of the Weather Underground, which I think is a slightly more significant act than me serving on a board with somebody for actions that he did 40 years ago.